Thank you everyone for joining us today for this special event from Journalism at RMIT. My name is Alex Wake and I am the Program Manager for the Bachelor of Communication Journalism and the Acting Program Manager for the Graduate Diploma of Journalism. The Graduate Diploma is one of the courses that I teach into, and I have a particular fondness for the students who graduate from this one. Also joining us on the line today is Sonja Heydeman. Sonja is an industry fellow with journalism, and she will be teaching students who enter this course in their first and second semesters, and will take a really active role with students in the internship space. And we also have the two wonderful graduates of our program, Richard Willingham, who is now with the ABC, and Chloe Booker, who is with the Age. I'm just going to go through some general information about the program to begin with, and then we'll come into conversation about reporting in the time of COVID with Richard and Chloe. But before we do begin, I would like to say, Woman Jenka, welcome. The word means welcome in the Victorian Aboriginal language of the Wurundjeri people. It's really important for us at RMIT that we do pay our respects to our elders, to the Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation. Over the last few years at RMIT, it has become central to our understanding and learning at the University of Indigenous People, and it's something that we do take very seriously. In my classes, we certainly start each lesson with a acknowledgement of country, and people are encouraged to do that in their own ways and wherever they are in place at the time. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to participants in the next day or so, and there will be an open question and answer session at the latter end of the webinar. So a little bit about our graduate diploma at RMIT. It has had an awesome reputation in the local industry, not just in Victoria, but our graduates are throughout the world, from the BBC to China television, ABC America. They're absolutely everywhere. And that is because it is a 1 year's skills-based course aimed firmly at students who have a degree in something other than journalism. So many of the students who come to us might have a degree in science or physiotherapy. We've had lawyers, we've had doctors, anaesthetists, scientists, you name it. We've had people with those undergraduate degrees in our classes. We are very much focused on churning out journalists who will work in the mainstream media, and that is very much our focus. But that's not to say that graduates of our program haven't also gone on to become media advisors, working for all shades of political parties. We have people who work for the Greens, the Reason Party, the Liberals, the Nationals and the Labor Party. So that's a very strong part of our program and interest in politics. And we certainly have the full range of social media and digital content managers, not just in news journalism, but also in sport particularly. By doing this course, we hope that you will fast-track your journalism career into, as I said, the local, national and international news industry. You will learn the foundation skills of print, broadcast and digital journalism. Our courses are constantly updating. So, as I said, we have Chloe and Richard on the line. Some of the courses that they did with us a few years ago no longer exist, and we have new courses. One of the new courses that we have is Digital and Data Journalism, where there's a very heavy focus on visualizations of information. We also have fact-checking and verification courses, short courses that are built into our degree. So it is a constant program of renewal and ensuring that our graduates finish their year with the absolute up-to-date skills that the industry is requiring them to have. We have very close relationships with news organisations, and we, even in the year that has happened, we have still managed to organise virtual internships with the major news organisations throughout Australia and abroad. I was only today talking to the Japan Times about sending a student there on a virtual exchange at the moment. But we have students in at the ABC, Fairfax, Channel 9 now, News Corp, 7, many go to the Canberra Times, SEN, regional media, and we're constantly, and Sonja, as I said, our internship coordinator and placement person, spends a lot of her time matching students to their dream placement. So no one is a number at RMIT. In this course, we're very much treated as an individual. And that really pays off for us in terms of getting our students into jobs. Briefly take you through some of the graduates of the last couple of years, just so you can see where people end up. This is Matt Nevert, who graduated in 2018. He's worked at RSN, that's the racing channel. They actually provide us with a paid internship for students who are interested in sport, and the ABC in Ballarat. Richard Crabtree, again a 2018 graduate. He is now working at the Wimmera Mail Times, and we do encourage our graduates to look at regional media. It's a really fantastic way to learn the skills of journalism before going on to the big media outlets in Melbourne or London or Hong Kong or wherever you may wish to go. This is Rio Davis. He graduated in 2018 and is now at ABC Gippsland. I just want to point out that while Rio was with us, he actually won a trip to Paris, and we actually presented at a conference in Paris. There's not many students that can say that they had a fully paid trip to Paris as part of their studies, but Richard's able to say that. He was also fortunate to get a regional scholarship from the federal government, which was aimed at encouraging students from regional and remote areas to do journalism as a degree. Just moving to last year's graduate, here is Sam Richards. As I said, we're not just aiming at the Age and the ABC, we're also at those allied industries, and he's gone into media with the Melbourne Rebels, which is wonderful for my children who support the Rebels. We also have Siobhan McKenna, who graduated in 2018, and she is working for Channel 9 Regional. Cassie Power, who was a graduate in 2019, she's at the Canberra Weekly. Again, many of our students tend to have an interest in politics and do end up in Canberra. It's a very good first newspaper, the Canberra Weekly, a good place to start. And lastly, of our featured graduates from the last couple of years is Katie McLeod, who is now with the Advertiser in Wagga, a great little regional paper and a wonderful place to cut your teeth. Up next, as I said, we have Sonja Heydeman, who is the lecturer and industry fellow for journalism, working both across the graduate diploma, but also the Bachelor of Communication Journalism. Richard Willingham, who is with the ABC, and Chloe Booker with The Age. Chloe is the city reporter for The Age, and before that was with the Weekly Review and the Border Mail. And she started at the Young Witness, which is up in Young from memory. My first question to Chloe, because she's been on the front lines of reporting COVID, which is the subject of our discussion today. Hi, Chloe.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's just lovely to see you. You're obviously on a day off from The Age, or are you working from home?
No, I'm working from home. Yeah, I'm just taking a break to do this.
Okay. And what's the big story of today?
Well, I'm actually just doing a quite lovely story about big issue vendors going back on the street tomorrow. So it's not quite the big story, but I've just heard that the hotel quarantine inquiry is now going to be delivering its final report in December. So I guess that's just probably the biggest thing that I've seen today.
Yeah, I haven't, because I've been preparing for this. It was one of the very rare days I have not watched the Premier's press conference, and you know, I get a bit anxious if I've missed out on hearing what he has to say. But you've raised concern about those press conferences and that there's being too much spin in them. Is that, or is that just some days there's been too much spin?
No, I wasn't really talking about the press conferences, and to be honest, because I'm a city reporter, I also don't watch them every day. I try to, but I don't always have time. But yeah, no, I was talking about when I wrote the first story I wrote on hotel quarantine. I thought about it afterwards, and I thought about the PR person for the health department telling me that it would be a mistake to do the story and that I was off track. And, you know, perhaps she was given the wrong information herself. Perhaps she wasn't lying, but whoever was instructing her, or, you know, obviously that, you know, we've now seen that the story was right on the money. So I wrote that just as was meant to be a bit of a Twitter rant. I wrote that on my couch, and then later on in the day I was asked to turn it into an opinion piece. So yeah, I was surprised that a lot of people ended up reading it, because I didn't expect it to be that well read. But, you know, in hindsight, I was sitting on quite valuable information that they had tried to stop the story, and I think I wrote it out of frustration at the time, because the former health minister was, you know, it was quite clear that the government would have known there were problems, yet but she was trying to make out that it wasn't known until a later date. And so I just out of frustration, I wrote that.
Yeah, it was really well read. I want to throw now to Richie. Richard is Victoria's state political reporter for the ABC in Melbourne. He joined the ABC in 2017 after 7 years covering Victorian federal politics at The Age. He started at the Bendigo Advertiser, which is, again, a lovely, wonderful little paper and a great place to start. Rich, what do you think about the spin and the press conferences? You've been there most days.
Yes, for my sins, I've been there way too many times. They are arduous. And Chloe's piece was fantastic and really hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the spin and the lack of transparency we've seen throughout COVID. Now, it's important, the government would argue, that everyone gets the right message, but the public is also entitled to know what's going on and have a level of transparency. And, you know, throughout this crisis, the more journalists have been critical and doing their job of holding the government to account, there has been quite a lot of pushback from some elements of the public saying, well, no, this is a crisis, the normal rules don't apply. Well, the normal rules do apply, but there's also, as a journalist, there's different roles to play. And there is the critical information about what's going on during this crisis, the pandemic. People are logging on, they're watching TV, they're listening to radio more than ever. You know, it's gone back up, the trend, because people are searching for that basic information about how many people have got the virus, what the latest health advice is. And that's the really, you know, it's one of the really critical roles of journalism. But the other role of journalism is also to make sure what we're hearing is right and that the systems that are in place are working as they should. So it's been a really fascinating time to be a journalist. For me personally, being one of the senior reporters in the ABC News team in Melbourne, I've covered a lot of it, and there is that constant balance that we need to make, particularly the ABC, about providing that information that people so crave. And all you have to do is look at the ratings for people tuning into those press conferences to know that people are after information. But also, it's really important for us as journalists to tell the stories that governments aren't necessarily comfortable with us telling. That's our job, and people have been critical of that. But that's our job.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things going on there. As someone watching at home and as a journalism scholar, I really thought about those press conferences, and they are live streamed, and it's the Premier talking directly to Victorians, and it's almost as if the journalists are there as a distraction to his message. And that seems to be upsetting the public, who are seeing some journalism practice, a part of journalism practice, up and live and dirty for the very first time. Is that a good way of? I think
Andrews is a political genius, right? Love him or loathe him, he's one of the smartest, savviest politicians we've seen in this country for some time. He uses things like social media, and these press conferences have become a really important tool for bypassing the media, essentially. He needs the media to get the message out, but he's essentially, as you point out, often bypassing us. So when the media asks questions about what he said and challenges the spin or the lines, he looks like he's telling the truth, etc., etc. So the public are now seeing how the sausage is made, if you like. I've been covering press conferences, 10 years. And what's remarkable about the Andrews ones at the moment is that they're every day and they're very, very long. But I've been to other press conferences that are way more combative. It's just, but they aren't broadcast. So it's just this. People are now seeing how the process happens, and they may not like it. And some people do. It's a tense environment for everyone. It's a high pressure situation for everyone. Every journalists aren't immune from the pandemic. It's affecting our lives as well. And so sometimes people naturally may, get a bit tetchy in these press conferences. And because the public has seen that for perhaps the first time, especially since the microphones were turned on, some people are a bit, I guess, taken aback by how it happens. But I don't think it's sort of anything. And people have got more time to watch too, because they're at home. And so it's been a really interesting dynamic and something that we haven't seen before, and it may continue as new practice, or people may go back to the old way and press conferences are held for the press and the politicians, and then the press does its job and takes information back to its viewers, readers, etc.
Yeah, it's very much like the White House press conferences at the moment, very sort of structured and almost scripted in the ways they've been. But Chloe, it does occur to me that actually the best stories of this pandemic haven't been from that press conference. They've been from journalists outside covering stories elsewhere, even sometimes interstate. Have you felt that, as when you're looking at all the kinds of journalism that's been happening around this, that the best journalism isn't in that space?
Well, I think for me, I came back from maternity leave in February, and only a few weeks later, we were sent home, and so it's been interesting for me starting a new round, working from home and not going out and meeting contacts, and just a different way of working. But yeah, I guess my beat has been more to look at how, I don't think there's any round that hasn't. The story is still COVID. It doesn't matter which round you are. So whether or not you're covering the daily press conferences, I'm looking at the way that COVID-19 has impacted on the city in terms of our businesses, homeless, even, the way that the council elections rolled out. So, I don't think there's many stories these days where I don't write the word COVID-19 in it. So, and I think that, some of the human interest stories that have come out of it, I think that, I think it's hard to imagine, before the pandemic, what made a story, and then looking at what makes a story now. So, a lot of things that that would have made a story just don't cut it anymore because there's just so much going on. Yeah.
One of the things that has been a feature of this time, and which you kind of alluded to this, was the abuse that's been meted out, you know, to some working journalists in that press conference. Is there something that you've done as a group, the Spring Street journalists, to unite or not unite? I don't actually know what the answer to this one is around that, because it's been really distressing at times at home watching some of those comments, particularly hurtful and harmful comments aimed at particular people, regardless of whatever you think of them. It's quite distressing.
It's pretty feral at times. Abuse on social media of journalists is not new, but it's certainly become worse in Australia and in Victoria in the last couple of months. There hasn't been anything active that we've done. We ask each other, "Are you okay?" Offline. We see each other. We do talk to each other and ask if people are doing okay. But I mean, the thing is with social media, I tended to ignore it. I do get it, but I don't get it nearly as badly as women do. And yeah, there's some pretty awful, disgusting things out there. There hasn't been anything formally done, but we check in on each other. Every now and again, I'll have a slip up and I'll fire back at some of these trolls. I don't know why. I shouldn't, but I do. But I mean, people are just angry. I think people are bored and angry. They're keyboard warriors. It's the real problem of social media. It's not unique to Australia or Victoria. It's just, people think that they're better than us. They think they know how to do journalism properly, because it's not just you're not a journalist. People who, what I found really, additional to the abuse of some journalist cops is some of the people who don't like a story and say it's not journalism just because they don't agree with its outcome. It's like, I mean, I'm sure Chloe probably got this after her piece with, it's this real, we've become, and you see it really on steroids in the United States, this tribalism. You're either with us or you're against us, and it's, you write one thing against the Premier. And I've written quite a lot of analysis pieces, been critical of the Premier, and I'm, accused of all sorts of things, that I'm a liberal plant, or I work for Murdoch. Never worked for Murdoch. I've been at the Age and the ABC, but it's just this sort of unhinged if they disagree with you. And then other times I'm accused of being a Labor hack, and it's just this constant, you've just got to block it out. And it's something you'll confront as a journalist, but you've just got to block it out. And I make a point of turning Twitter off when I'm not working, not checking it, because it's just feral. It's just feral.
Chloe, what about you? Do you have a different take on that, the attacks on journalists and how people are coping, particularly at this time of COVID?
Look, I feel like, I'm a bit removed from, how it might be impacting the individual journalists that they have to go to the press conferences, but just watching it with everyone else on Twitter, it's felt really ugly. And I think I've probably noticed it more so. I've done a bit of reporting on hotel quarantine, and as a result of that, I have had the same thing. People accuse me of being a right-wing hack just because I'm reporting something critical of the government, and it just gets quite frustrating. And then because of that, because of my reporting on hotel quarantine, I think I got quite a lot of followers that might align more with the right. And then if I ever write anything that's vaguely like pro, like great with when we got zero numbers the other day, and I shared that, I had people attacking me, saying why are you following the government, or it just seems that people are so divided at the moment that you can't say anything negative or positive about the government without being accused of being on one side or the other. And some of the stuff I see on there is just is bizarre. But I think we'd have to remember that a lot of people, that is just Twitter, and a lot of people aren't on Twitter. But yeah, I find it interesting talking to people in my life that aren't journalists, and you know, and they all say, oh, you know, I'm sick of the press conferences and all the silly questions that are being asked. And what people don't understand is that sometimes you have to ask the question over and over again because that's the way it works. But for them who are sitting at home and they might want to know about some particular aspect of the announcement, you know, they get frustrated. So as Richard was saying, it's, you know, it's that balance that I don't think has come up before. Mm.
Have there been some lessons from this for journalists from about how we report going forward? I mean, I'm seeing, you know, the live streaming of press conferences, and my take on it is that, you know, journalists should stop, you know, giving it credibility by even suggesting that it is a journalistic activity. Let him do his thing and talk to the people and do your journalism, you know, elsewhere. But maybe that's going too far. Have you thought about it? Have you taken a moment to think about it, Rich?
I think that we need to make sure we ask him as many questions as possible, for using the example of Andrews, because he, you know, taking the example, I said contact tracing was great. It wasn't, you know, it was a mistruth. So I think that it's our job, it's an accountability role, as you know, as much as reporting. So I think that the whole point of those press conferences is that we're just using the example of Premier Andrews here, that he has to be held, our right is to ask those questions. And some questions may sound stupid to some people, but it might be leading up to a point down the track. It's not always the instant answer. I think if we're arguing that we should be asking less questions in those press conferences, I think that's a bad path to take. Yes, some questions really are stupid, and I've sat there and put my head in my hands with some of those questions from colleagues, and I'm sure they've done the same with some of my questions, because you've got, let's say, a dozen media outlets in there. Each might have a different angle that they're taking that night or the following day or from the newspaper, etc. So what might be what I might think is a terrible question might be a fantastic question for the Herald Sun or for Channel 7 or for The Age, etc. So I think we need to ask these questions. I think the press conferences are too often, and because the Premier, you know, is willing to occupy the crease for as long as it takes, it does open up that opportunity to ask silly questions or ask him the same question over and over again. I mean, there's a way around, you know, stopping the questions being repetitive. It's just answer them. But because, unlike other press conferences, pre-COVID, most press conferences would go with the Premier 15 and a half an hour, and there'd be a last questions called 3 times, and then the Premier would usually, okay, I've got to go to my next thing. But because we've got this sort of show now, you know, the Dan Andrews hour, you've got he's not going. He's not in a hurry to be anywhere else, because literally he comes from his home into the work to do the press conference and goes back and works from home, I'm pretty sure. So he's got nowhere to be physically. So it's part of his show now. So I think we just need to keep asking the questions. Yes, it's frustrating for some people watching at home. I get frustrated. I'm sure my colleagues get frustrated, but that's where we are right now. And yeah, I think that more questions is always good.
Yeah. Interesting, you talked about, you know, different questions being right for different news outlets. And one of the things, and Chloe, I'm going to ask this of you, one of the things that has I think the public hasn't understood as they've been watching is that the difference between what is a Victorian story, so the kinds of questions that Rich yourself might ask, and what's a national story, and therefore, you know, why Peter Credlin might be there and ask a very different kind of thing to everyone else. Do you think that the mix of the journalists and the mix of print and broadcast journalists in that space has caused particular issues?
Do you mean the criticism where people say that you know, the same pressure isn't being applied on the federal government as it is as the state government? Is that what you're?
Well, some of it is. I just do feel that there is, you know, different places have different audiences, so therefore just what they're asking is going to be different. And if you're a Victorian and sitting in lockdown watching on your screen, you really want to know whether or not you can get to the shops. Whereas if you're sitting in Sydney or in Queensland, and I know that people in those states are watching, they want to ask about hotel quarantine, and they want to ask about holidays, and they want to ask the kinds of things that Peter Credlin was heading down with when she asked. So I wonder if that's a factor in how people are reacting to those conferences.
Yeah, look, I've thought about it a bit, and I'm not sure what the answer is either, because I've spoken to, you know, my non-journalist friends who find it frustrating when they want to know about you know, a particular aspect of the restrictions or something rather than hotel quarantine, and there was a lot of frustration about the questions about that. But I tend to, I guess, yeah, I'm with Rich. I think the more questions, the better, and sometimes that does take asking the same question over and over again. You know, one thing I think it's also the public don't always realise that some of the questions that journalists are asking are because their editors have asked them, and maybe a reader has asked us to ask them. And you know, I watch the press conferences and think how I admire my colleagues who are there every day and facing that kind of pressure. I think you know, there's sometimes I'll hear people criticising particular journalists, and I think it's hard for people to understand. People always think that it would, you know, they do a better job in that situation, but it's an incredibly high pressure situation, and you know, with all these competing, you know, you'd probably be, if I was there, I'd be worried about asking a question that everyone thought was stupid, but at the same time, you have to do your job, and you have to ask questions that your editors asked you to ask, and you have to, you know, there's some readers that will want a particular question asked, and other, you know, people watching it think it's a stupid question. So it's a really hard. I don't know how it could be done differently, because without all the needs being addressed. I'm not sure what the answer is.
It's interesting. Rich, you've written a little bit about this, and you know, you've talked about, you know, writing the first draft of history. I was so excited when COVID started, which makes me feel really ashamed actually, but it was the first time there was a new story, and God only knows how long. It was something that had come and we didn't know how it was going to be. And I know it was quite interesting. The journalism staff at RMIT all trotted into work, you know, the next day, and you know, we had a meeting, and there was sort of, you know, great excitement about how this story was playing out, and we all realised in that moment that actually all the other programs had taken time and weren't in the city, and they were all taking it, you know, looking at this in one way, and we were all like, yes, this is so interesting, we want to be part of it. How do you feel? How have you reacted to it, particularly as it's now gone on for such a long time?
I think when it first happened, and you could feel it happening, because I cover state politics, I was close to a lot of the decision makers, and you could just feel that, and you knew something was up. You know, we did know, we were probably lucky that the government here was taking it seriously. And I remember vividly that week leading up to the Grand Prix, and you just every hour was changing. The phone was just running hot. You know, you were working the phones, find out what was happening. And it was really, you know, this is one of those, and I think a bit like what you said, Alex, is that you get that journalism excitement. It's a big story on, you know, how good's this? Because there's a special buzz in a newsroom. It's the same, you know, at The Age, the ABC, wherever. There's a special buzz in a newsroom when there's a big story happening. Sometimes it's tension because it's really awful. You know, when you consider things like the Burke Street incident with Gargasoulis, or COVID. Would literally, it's a thing that nobody had ever faced before, well, for 100 years, but you know, no one knew how to respond to this. You know, public health was doing their best, but it was the same for journalism. How do we cover this? And it was frenetic. It was and it was pretty amazing to be part of. You know, you wish you weren't covering it, but a colleague, you know, a journalist who's been a journalist for 30 years said to me, this will be the biggest story of his life, and he's covered things like Black Saturday, Ash Wednesday, and all other, you know, big corruption scandals. And it's just, you know, this is the biggest story of my life. We're all, and hopefully will be the biggest in terms of it, because it's a story that's not like some political scandal or, you know, some corruption. This affects everyone's lives. And you've got to remember that. And every now and again, you take a step back and you go, okay, this story is going to be read by people or watched by people more than ever before, and people are really going to be hanging on every word because it's that information. It's, you know, when you write a newspaper story, people read the first 4 sentences, you know, radio listen to the first bits, and, you know, so on and so forth. So this is people really paying attention, and just you realise straight away the gravity of what we're dealing with. And I think as journalists, it's been a pretty remarkable effort given the pressure, like financial pressure and resources pressure that so many newsrooms are under to pump it out. I certainly know at the ABC there's been 4 or 5 of us who have been doing the, you know, the day in, day out, and it's just, you know, it's a slog. It really is a slog.
Yeah, well, and the general public knows everyone's names. They know Samar, they know Rachel, they know Alex, they know Richard, they know Chloe. These are, you know, no longer are the journalists are some byline that's not known. It's everyone. Everyone who's covering COVID stories is certainly being noticed. Chloe, what do you feel about, you know, writing and being on because you've also, and I think expressed some of what I've been feeling too, about you're in the story, you're reporting the story, but you're also, you know, at home and dealing as a human being with this. How have you felt about it all?
Yeah, it's been yes, you are living the story, so that's been really interesting. You know, as I said before, starting a new round and, you know, like going, you know, as everyone was talking about Zoom meetings, you're starting to do, you know, coffees are no longer going to a coffee shop, they're doing it over Zoom. And, you know, I think some rounds people are still, you know, going out of the house, but I think I've been to 1 press conference, and otherwise everything, I think that's the only time I've not reported from home. So, but yeah, it was, it's, you know, there's never a slow news day anymore. So that's been interesting.
Pray for a slow news day.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully, as those numbers get better, hopefully there will be slower and slower news days. I want to bring it back to journalism education. You both did our graduate diploma, and there's been a lot of headlines, you know, about, you know, journalism, you know, in the past year, and, you know, some newspaper closures and furloughs. I still think, hand on heart, that it's the most exciting career you can possibly have, and so important and wonderful, and I have no problem encouraging people to continue to study journalism. Richie, are you still in the camp of journalism education is fantastic and want to encourage people down this path?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I got a lot out of it. It was the stepping stone I needed to launch my career, I think. I think and I think I've said this to lots of grad programs when I've spoken to them. I think you really need to take advantage of the connections it gets you. My first full-time job in journalism was the Bendigo Advertiser, and that was solely because I did a internship with the Bendigo Addy when I was at RMIT, and I just jumped at it and just hassled the editor after I finished the course, saying, "Give me a job, give me a job, give me a job, give me a job, give me a job." And because I used the week-long internship as a sort of a pitch, an audition, if you like. So, and I think you know, it was more than 10 years ago since I was there, but I think, you know, just the focus on just the basics, right? I got the most out of just how to write a news story. Lose all that how to write an arts essay. Just think about how to write a news yarn. Just get the and because journalism is it's simple. It's complicated, but it's also quite simple. So I think that it was really beneficial for me, and I'm still a journalist 10 years on. I'm loving it. I'm not going anywhere. So, and I mean, journalism is a great job. You can, the money is not great at the start. It's not a job you're going to be earning $1 million or anything like that, but you get to do some pretty cool stuff. I've got to travel for work and go overseas, on a few occasions, and you get to see different parts of Victoria if that's what you want to do, and you get to, if politics is your thing, you get to be there on the front line. I think it's pretty awesome, and a lot of journalists are good people too. So I don't know, the camaraderie at the ABC is great. It was, when I was at the Age, it was a pretty good lot. Still friends with a lot of people at the Age. So I think it's a pretty good career, but it's hard. But it's not a walk in the park. You've got to work for it, and the people who work the hardest, and are willing to. I always found the people who are willing to go and work outside of Melbourne to start with. It's probably the best learning, the best opportunity. And my advice is, if you are in those positions, doing an internship or at one of those country papers, and a story comes that you think is beneath you, just do it, and you'll find that I tell this story when I was at the Benio Addy as an intern. I was sent because the grandma had won a raffle for a car from Toyota. It's great, a little picture story, page 6 or something. Anyway, I spoke to her. I think they were just expecting, 20 centimetres in a picture. But it turns out that she couldn't drive manual, and they wouldn't change it for her because she said, "I'm too old to learn how to drive manual." And so I got this lovely story about how she'd won a car, but she couldn't drive it. Anyway, the ad department went absolutely nuts because of one of the biggest advertisers who had pissed off. But anyway, turned into a great little story. But everything is out there. You got to approach everything with an open mind, especially in those first years. And my advice is, you're not going to be a feature writer on day one, but if that's what you want to do, you will get there. So that's my advice.
I'm going to download that and actually replay it to students ad nauseum for the next 12 months. Chloe, what about you? Are you still got the fire in your belly for journalism, education, and journalism?
Yeah, definitely. I love journalism. I've still got, I love my round now, but I've got aspirations. There's so many different things you can do in journalism. You can, whether you want to be a features writer or you want to, there's investigations or, human interest stories. There's just so many, state politics. I think if you move around, then you can, it could never possibly be boring for me. I think but going back to the postgrad, I think I use things that I learned in the postgrad every day still. I really think I really enjoyed it. And also that advice that we got, to hustle and to, not give up. And, I'm not sure what it's like now, but the job market back then was hard. And, that advice, to go regional, to keep trying, that was probably some of the best stuff I learnt, was to, I think before that I wasn't aware of, of what it would take, but then, the people who are willing to do whatever it takes will get there. That's what I learned. The people who were like, no, I'm not going to take this job, it's beneath me. I don't want to do this story, it's beneath me. You'll have a hard time making it if you've got that attitude. But if you really want it, and you keep trying, you don't give up, then it's there for you.
Thank you, Chloe. If there are any questions, people can put them into the Q&A part of this. Otherwise, I'll just throw to Sonja now. Sonja, can you just talk us a little bit about our processes now for the internships? Both of these guys, have talked about that. and what you're doing, particularly in the last 12 months. You've had an interesting 12 months, but you've also got some really exciting things happening for next year. Could you just talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. You know, internship is such an important part. Just as Rich and Chloe said, it remains an integral part, I think, of the grad dip. And even in COVID times, we've been able to have internships we've run with about 40 different news organisations around the country. We've had radio, we've had all sorts of print outlets, niche outlets as well. And our students have been able to get real world experience. They've been able to get bylines, they've been able to have features that they've put together on the ABC, etc. So even in this year's cohort, so it's really important we get a sense of what's happening today, because you look at Rich, you look at Chloe and think, you know, we've got incredible people who've come from this program, but we also have, you know, we have years of amazing journos, and I think we've got a very strong alum. Even this year, we've got students, they haven't even graduated yet, and they have jobs at the Canberra Weekly, through the McPherson Media Group at Shep News, through a newspaper in the Whit Sundays, through Channel 9, A Current Affair, through SEN. We're already seeing our students with a foot in the door, and not just a small foot in the door, but cadetships and jobs working as journalists proper. And that advice of going regional, we give you lots of support to be able to consider your options, and regional options are always good to contemplate. This is something that we're going to be continuing to build on, as we always do, but into next year. I expect there will be a blended model where people will be able to tap into internships around the country, whether it's in person or whether it is in a remote sense, but that's through, hopefully we'll resume in on-site placements through television networks, radio, print, and also niche, because it is about looking at what an individual is really interested in, what might be best for them based on where they are at the time. And as Alex said in the beginning, it's quite a strange thing, especially if you've done a bachelor degree somewhere, for example, and you might not have had that one-on-one hand-holding experience of having a lecturer phone you and talk you through what you'd really love to do, and set up something that is really designed for you and is going to be able to maximise your CV, your portfolio, and also have building block experience as you go through the course of the degree. So I'm really excited about internship. We have, if anyone is especially interested in things like data journalism, we've got an award-winning data journalism interdisciplinary internship program where our journalism students, they're paired with Master of Analytics students, and they go into News Corp and they're able to work as data journalists effectively in pairs, and we've had our students actually secure employment full-time as data journalists at News Corp off the back of that alone. We have other interdisciplinary internships as well that are niche. So if you have coding skills, if you have particular skill sets that, whether it's, you know, across, you might have an undergraduate degree in science or IT, medicine, law, we can also work to integrate your current skill set into what you might like to do in journalism. So there are so many options.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sonja. It's really exciting program that Sonja has put together. Just want to come to final words for both Rich and Chloe. Rich, final words to us on, you know, the floor is yours. Journalism, future, COVID, life.
That's just a lot to ask there. I think we must try as journalists try and ignore the criticisms online. I mean, some of it about angles and stuff is probably warranted in certain places, but the press conferences are the press conferences. That's because they're live has opened a whole new world up to people. It is a hard job, and some people will ask silly questions. That comes with the territory. Our job is more important than ever, I think, in terms of getting information out there. And from my role as a political journalist, particularly, is making sure that questions of government are made, because we've seen this year that, you know, while the government has said, you know, the communications has been pretty good, it hasn't always been truthful. And so we live in an age where we're becoming more and more tribal, and I would encourage people to make sure they read widely, watch widely. Don't just read The Age because that's your worldview, or don't just read The Australian because that's what you read. You know, to journalism students, make sure you read widely, and you watch widely, and you listen widely. You know, expand your, because we are in danger as a society of becoming a little bit too tribal, and we only look for things that we agree with rather than looking outside and having a sort of different diversity of views. Journalism is a great job. I love it. Wouldn't do anything else. So I encourage people to do it. And I'll leave with the late great Mickey Gordon always said to me when I was trying to get into journalism, you've got to want it. You've got to really want it. So, and that's sort of been my motto for a long time. You've got to want it. So that's where I'll leave that.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rich. And you, Chloe, any last words, last thoughts?
Yeah, just take as many internships as you can. You know, just take whatever opportunity, any opportunity that comes to you, take it. I don't know, I always find that my mother was a journalist, and she said to me, you know, that she just felt like she was in, you know, at the centre of the world being a journalist. I often reflect on that, and that's often what I feel like. I feel like, you know, I'm in the middle of what's happening, and you know, it's exciting, and you know, there's a lot of adrenaline, but it's also, you know, you gain an insight into society that I don't think that you could get anywhere else, because you know, you write across so many different subjects, and you get to speak to so many different experts or everyday people, and it just gives you this insight that even if you didn't stay a journalist forever, it's always going to be valuable. So I don't think I think, you know, studying journalism and working in journalism, you know, no matter where your life takes you, it'll always be of benefit. So good luck, and yeah, reach out if you ever you know, want any advice or anything.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to have talked to you both today. Thank you so much. It's such a busy time, and I cannot, you know, we cannot thank you enough for actually making time for us. And we hope keep safe and keep asking those questions, you know, the smart ones, but you could ask the dumb ones. You've convinced me of that. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.